Welcome to our third in a series on how to design your first course using ISD. In this session, we're going to look at design, and Denise is all set for us. So grab that paper and pencil, grab something to drink, and join us.
You have instructional design questions. We discuss answers.
Okay, if you've joined us for the previous two sessions, you've already been through a NOP analysis and a rather extended analysis process for Denise's project. So in this particular session, what we're going to do is we're going to dig into design. So we're going to look at a lot of things that most designers will think about and produce as product in the design element using the ADDIE model as our foundational event. But you have to think, as you look at this, just remember this is a small course, an abbreviated video for you to look at, and many times design is months long, years long. So as we look at things, I don't want anybody to get the impression that I can do this in 30 minutes or an hour. It's not going to happen. But what we're going to do is touch on the things that are specific to Denise's course and use that as our model. So we've looked at so many things, Denise, and I know that you've done a lot of work for this. You put together a product and we show us slides. But one of the things that we talked about when we were talking about analysis, this whole decision tree thing. And as designers, there are things that have to be decided. Some of them are decided by us. Some are decided by clients or whoever's sponsoring your course or project. And we came up with three that we thought were important. And why don't we list those, Denise, and let's talk about them.
Okay, so here they are listed for our decision tree. Prerequisites, whether this course is going to be mandatory or not, and how are we going to determine mastery?
Perfect. And you're going to find these in almost every course. So why do we think about prerequisites? We think about them because we have to know where to start the content. I mean, this is rather sophisticated content, and we can't just start at the beginning, which the course would then run for 6 or 7 years. And I don't think that Denise's population is going to sit through that. So what we're going to have to determine here, Denise, is what are the things? What do you want them to be able to demonstrate to you or show to you to the level of sophistication that satisfies you as a designer and as the client here, that they know the information, the prerequisite information, and what is that going to be? So I know you've got some stuff that you came up with. Mm-hmm. So what kind of prerequisites are we looking at?
So in terms of prerequisites, really very, very minimal in terms of they really don't need to have experience moderating an event, because the whole purpose of this course is to teach them how to moderate an event for our organization.
So now what about the technology? What kind of entry level or what else would you want them to have? Mm-hmm. Be able to use a computer at what level? Be able to use specific softwares at what level? Have something loaded in their computer? What are those kind of things?
So they should have PowerPoint, Microsoft PowerPoint on their systems, because our events use Microsoft PowerPoint slides to be able to show advertiser sponsorship slides as well as presentation slides. So
you want to make sure that you version that, at least give them an idea what's an acceptable version. Because there'll be people that have it back from when it came out in 1989 or something.
And you bring up a really good point, because I did run into that with the last event that we did. And over the summer, one of our moderators had an old version of PowerPoint and didn't realize it and couldn't figure out why she wasn't able to do what I was asking her to do with the slide in terms of setting up the slideshow so it would show seamlessly.
And this is very common. So as you're designing your course, if you're not designing Denise's course, you got to think about this. Prerequisites should be able to do something. And a lot of people get lulled into this notion that they can say, should be able to operate a PC or an Apple computer and should have knowledge of or intermediate knowledge of. And you might as well not even say any of those stuff. You need to be incredibly specific. So in this case, I would say your prerequisites should have a version whatever or later and should be able to do the following things in PowerPoint. And then you can list those things, whatever it is, be able to, make it do a slideshow or whatever you need to do. But if you can then roll that out, I think you're going to be perfect with that. And all of you, when you get to technology, don't fall into this notion that somebody knows something. Well, okay. No, they don't. You need to be very specific about what you want them to be able to demonstrate in terms of their ability to use this software or this technology. If not, you will have a population all over the place, and you're going to spend a lot of time trying to get everybody on the same page when you could have eliminated that with a good set of prerequisites.
Oh, okay. That makes a lot of sense. And well, I will tell you that one of the things that worries me, just because of my past experience with bringing moderators or hosts onto various events, is most people do not know how to operate a slideshow presentation when they're on an online event. They're showing their side panels, they're showing everything that shouldn't be showing. And there is a very simple technique that I wanted to incorporate in the training course, in this training course, that would bring everybody on the same page so everything looks consistent. So I'm not sure that they need to be experts in PowerPoint. I just think that they need to have the PowerPoint version that will allow for this to happen. And they will be walked through exactly how to set up their PowerPoint presentation.
And that's fine. That's really all you need.
Okay.
So for technology, be specific as you need to be.
Okay. Perfect. And of course, because they are going to be speaking, they need to have access to, obviously, a computer. They need to have access to a webcam. It could be an integrative webcam on their laptop. They need to have good, and this is going to be tricky. They need to have good audio because they can't sound like they're underwater. Like some
What's
people.
Good audio?
Yeah,
See?
exactly. So
as designer, I'm going to push my client here, my subject matter expert, and say, how would you define good audio?
that's true, because the fact that
So this is where you have to look at the way you word these prerequisites, because are you going to have a generation of computers? Are you going to allow an iPad or some other tablet that has an integrated camera? Are you going to require a 4K camera, or are you going to be happy with a lower resolution? These are the kind of things. This is why design takes so long. I think we could spend 4 or 5 hours talking about this just in this video. But for the purposes of walking through the process, those are the kind of things you want to think about.
Okay, that's helpful. And because we don't have a budget to provide 4K webcams for everybody, or great mic systems, I'll have to incorporate what is realistic, and probably basic webcam and basic audio microphone.
Yeah.
Okay.
But don't use basic. Don't use the word basic.
Okay.
See, this is why subject matter experts want to take us out in the backyard, because we'll keep pushing. And that's what designers will do, say, what's good mean?
So don't use an adjective.
Nah.
Okay. Don't use an adjective. Get the adjectives and slice them out like any good editor
So
would
an
do.
example would be, okay, we think you should have at least a 1080p camera.
Okay.
If possible, not a 720, but if you can do a 1080, that'd be great. 4K, perfect. If you have it, not required, because the software that you're using probably doesn't accept it anyway. It'll accept it, but it knocks it down to whatever its standard is. And so it's those things. And like for audio, some of the things you use to define this is say it should be distinct audio. There shouldn't be echoes. There shouldn't, all the things that you notice when you're doing these, those are things you want to avoid. So usually integrated mics are horrible. And you have to think about, well, okay, they got to check the audio level in the software, because there's always an audio level for input and output.
Yes.
At least in everything I've ever seen. So one of your issues here is going to be, okay, how do I get them to adjust that level? And usually when they go to adjust that level, there is a digital representation of it, usually very simple, but at least something. So it doesn't want to be in the red. It needs to be 3/4 of the way up the scale, whatever the scale is. Listen for distortion. Those are the kind of things that you can put in here.
Okay, perfect. That's very helpful. Very, very helpful. And one thing, it's interesting that you talked about the camera, because with Zoom anyway, which is the environment that we'd be training in, Zoom will not record a high enough quality recording if you're using, believe it or not, a 4K camera.
Yeah, they won't take it.
It won't
right?
take it. And so it brings it all the way down to a 640 by 360 unusable recording. And I learned that the hard way a couple of times. And so if you're using a camera that is 1080p, usually that's okay. And it will record properly.
So that may be one of your prerequisites that you want to say, aim for a 1080. If you
Okay.
can't do it, let's make sure that we build into how you prepare these courses on a way to test this to make sure whatever they have works. And also require an audio test before.
Perfect.
Whoever the moderator is or whatever, just make sure that there's some way. And most of the stuff that I do, and I do keynotes and other things, we always have a session before the session.
Right.
Sometimes it's a week before, sometimes it's an hour before. But that's where we set levels. We make sure the camera and the lighting's right, make sure the audio is just like you and I do here on this channel. How much time do we spend before we go into record mode to check levels and lighting and everything else? So I think there's an abbreviated form of that you could build in here and
Perfect.
make that part of your prerequisites too.
Okay. Perfect. And I guess the next thing, so does that cover it for prerequisites? I didn't.
Yeah, because here's where it gets confusing with prerequisites. So when you're designing your course, and we talked about this briefly in the analysis video, don't include stuff that doesn't make any difference. So we don't care about age here. We don't care about 99% of the things that you might in other environments for learning. But what we care about is this technology relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if you focus on that and if you think about it, and I think if you word it in a way that everybody will be able to judge for themselves whether they can meet these prerequisites. And the other thing it does is not only is it an issue of can they meet them, it's if they don't, how do we deal with that? So a designer is going to look at this and say, some of these folks are not going to be able to first understand what you're saying to any degree that allows them to consider whether they can meet them or not, which provides you a source of a conversation. And you can say, okay, well, let me show you what 1080 is, or let me show you within the course what these things mean. And as a prerequisite, you can have a fallout or a fail-safe that says, if you're not sure, email us and let's walk you through it.
Okay.
And this is going to save you so much grief. And this is the other thing a prerequisite does, allows you this fallout mode where you can get to things before they're problems. Because this is not something you want to find out 5 minutes before you go live with 500 people.
No.
Right?
Correct.
So let's put it in the prerequisites. Let's put it before we even get in the course. Okay, let's help you find out what you got.
Perfect. Okay. So now the next thing on our list is this course going to be mandatory or not? And in our last video, we talked about the motivation factor of the learner. And I had some concerns that some of the learners may feel that a whole training program is going to be a waste of their time. I'll figure it out on the fly. Oh, I'm good at technology. I can do this on my own.
Yep.
And then show up on the day that they're going to moderate and everything falls apart. So,
Yeah.
because people, some people are procrastinators, some people don't follow through, things like that.
Really?
So,
I've never experienced that personally, but so yeah, I mean, this is all stuff that happens.
yeah,
And in your training environment, you want them to fail in front of you as a trainer, not in front of where they have to do this. I always encourage people to make mistakes in training. That's where we want you to make these mistakes. Let's figure them out. Let's fix them. So
That's
when
right.
you go out and do what we're trying to train you to do, you go out there and do it. So this is a perfect example of that. And I don't think I have any choice personally, but that's a design perspective.
yes.
It's not an organizational perspective. And I would never speak for an organization.
Mhm.
I can only as a designer, and designers listen up. This is how we talk to folks in this scenario is our recommendation is that you make this a mandatory course. If it's not mandatory, then I think you need to be willing to accept the fact that some of these folks will not do well.
Mhm.
Up to you.
Absolutely. Yes. All right. Mandatory it will be. I will suggest that. I do agree with that 1,000,000%. Speaking of percentage and stuff of that sort, let's talk about mastery.
Yeah.
What will determine how will I know somebody has mastered this? I thought about this.
And we're not going to know really till we get to the objectives and we look at those. But I think in general, as a designer, what I'm going to ask you is, do you want people to be able to demonstrate the totality of this before you assign them mastery?
Yes. Yes. The
Okay.
answer to that is
And
yes.
that's easy.
Yep, absolutely. I want them to demonstrate. I want to be able to observe that they can actually go through
Okay.
all of the enabling objectives and be able to do them without error.
Okay, so we'll check for performance agreement. We'll do all those things. But if that's your institutional and client perspective, then for a designer, that's very simple. I now have my rules on the road. I can do this. This is easy.
Perfect. So
Now what?
that's our decision tree, isn't it? Now I think it would be fun to talk about terminal objectives and enabling
Okay,
objectives.
let's look at them.
Okay,
Let's look at 'em.
when we think about terminal objective, the terminal objective for this course is this. Given a computer, a webcam, a log on to the organization's Zoom account, access to the internet, Microsoft PowerPoint slide presentation that includes a welcome slide and potential advertiser slides, scripts provided by the organization, job aid handouts, self-paced course modules, one-on-one meetings with the facilitator, and a group Q&A session, the online moderator student should be able to launch, lead, and troubleshoot technology issues in the organization's online event without error.
Okay, that's
Oof,
perfect.
that was a mouthful.
And for you budding designers out there, I want you to notice that this is an incredibly good example of what your conditions should be when you write objectives. They're all there. And I'm going to lose my SAG-AFTRA card because I'm going to read it off of here for a second. Did you put into your conditions a role play or something like that?
So it would be here the one-on-one meeting with facilitator. I guess
Okay,
I worded it
okay.
as that, but
Okay. Because you can't really get to your terminal objective degree element without having that vehicle. And if it's there, just word it differently, then you're fine.
how would
No, I
you, how
think
would you
that's-
suggest it worded? I'm sorry. What did you?
In a mock presentation environment or in a role play or something like that.
Okay. Yep. So I'll change that.
But I think it's a minor thing. I don't even know you need to change it. But just you can't have performance agreement unless you do that. Otherwise, it looks like a goal, which would be at the end of this, 3 weeks later, they'll be able to do this.
Yes.
Because everybody remember, budding designers remember this, and when you write objectives, they are for what happens in the course, not later. You don't write goals here. We're writing objectives. So everything has to be worded in a way that it's obvious that all these things take place in your course, not after your course.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, I think you got a great terminal objective. I have no problems with that. And I know you, so we probably have, 600 or 800 enabling objectives?
Okay. So I did put together, I think in total I have 22 slides, but they're not all enabling. I've had 3 slides before that. So what does that leave us with? 18, 19?
I don't know.
I'm sorry, I'm not a math
know.
person. Okay, so
So let's put one up. Put them up.
here's our first
Okay.
one.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, so with the enabling objective, I put the, at the beginning here is the
Put all the
4 parts.
conditions up
Yeah,
there.
the conditions are up here, and they serve all of the following enabling objectives. So,
And this is important to point out to all of you learning how to design is you can put your conditions and your audience and even in most cases your degree statement in a heading and then bullet out the behaviors. And it's a much simpler way to do it and sometimes incredibly easier to do it that way. So if your conditions are the same for all of your objectives, and you can cluster these by different conditions and then still bullet down 3 behaviors. But this is a great format. So get all the stuff that's redundant into your heading, bullet out your behaviors, and if you need to change the degrees, leave the degree out of the heading and put it, should be able to do this without error. Then you've got your behavior and your degree and your bullet. Or you can just do your behavior if you've got your degree that's the same for all of them.
okay. So I do have a question at this stage because when I wrote out these enabling objectives, I felt like I did a task analysis in order to come up with these. And so I wasn't sure if they were too granular. I mean, does this first bullet point suffice as an enabling objective by having, because it's a very critical part. If you're going to be loading up a presentation and hosting an entire event, you need your system to be at an optimal. You need to clear out your cache. You need that to be shut down, restarted, and all that.
If that's what you need to do.
Okay.
My view on this, and I think you'll find that most designers will tell you the same thing. You can't have too many objectives.
Okay.
The one thing you want to watch when you do a task analysis is sometimes designers are prone to not write objectives, but they write what? Procedures.
Procedures.
So as you write,
okay.
So when you write your enabling objectives, you have to be sure it's written as an objective and not as a procedure. So if you've got any of my books, look in there and go back to the index and look at procedures versus objectives and go to that page and it'll explain this better. But essentially, you don't want this to be a guide to how to do it. You want this to be an instructional product that gets you to defining mastery in a very thorough and in a way that's observable and measurable. So just one little caution. Not that you're doing that, but I think for the designers that want to do this right, you have to make sure you're not writing procedures.
That is an excellent point, because I think that's what I was worried about, is that I didn't want it to sound like a procedural task list. So you worded that so eloquently.
Well, I don't know about that, but I know from many task analysis projects that I had to go write objectives for, and we're talking tens and hundreds of thousands of objectives. It was always easier to write procedures than it was to write behavioral objectives.
Yes.
So every once in a while I'd fall back and I'd go back and read them and say, oh, come on, Chuck, you can do better than that.
Okay.
So I go back and rewrite them and make them objectives. It's usually one or two words that'll make the difference, but just heads up on that, folks. Just be cautious of that, especially when you draw stuff directly out of a task analysis, because a task analysis is procedures.
Okay.
Now we're writing objectives.
All right, so the next one is and this is sounding like a procedure actually, log into the host organization's Zoom account and launch the Zoom app, ensuring the audio, video is set to desired webcam and mic.
No, that's not a procedure.
Okay.
That could be rewritten as a procedure. You could say, and now you.
Oh, okay.
See the difference?
Very clear.
This is a perfect behavioral objective. Where it falls apart is if you put something in there, and now the student will.
Yes. Okay.
So it's subtle. And the more your design skills evolve, it'll just jump right out at you. So now I'm just mentioning it.
Yeah. That's
but this
really
one's
good
fine.
feedback. So now this next one is they have to launch PowerPoint slide presentation and put it into Browse by an individual window mode, which is what they're going to actually learn. They're going to learn how to do that, and place in slideshow mode so that they are ready to go when they go live.
I think what you might have is more than one objective there.
Okay, that's
How many separate things? Could you observe those for mastery all as one thing? Do they have to do all three to be perfect? And I think they do.
They do.
So then I would say, okay, back it out so that you have an objective for each one of those behaviors.
Okay.
And this is another point for objectives. As you're looking at this, as a designer, it's very easy to amalgamate behaviors in one objective. And I'm telling you, don't do it. Because somebody could do one of those perfectly and one of them not perfectly and one of them horribly. So how are you going to evaluate mastery?
Absolutely. Okay. That's
Can't do it.
Great. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
So one behavior per objective, no exceptions.
Okay, so the next one is going to be launch into practice session mode for the Zoom event they are to moderate.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay.
And I think as you go through all of these, we don't need to go through all of them because you've done such a great job, and we'll put them up for people to look at. But I think you've got the rhythm of it, and that's what's important.
Okay.
Each one of these will be different, each one. And the other thing, you have to make sure that you have now staged these from beginning to end. If you did a task analysis, you already have the order of these. But something that sometimes falls apart for designers is they make sure the sequencing is what it needs to be, and sometimes it isn't.
Right.
So you have to be sure that you don't have something that they're going to do later in the second spot where it should be in the fifth spot.
Exactly. Yeah, that makes
So
that
just
makes
not that
sense.
you've done that, and I don't think you have, but just for those of you watching this and you're learning, how to design your course, make sure you got the sequencing correct.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. I'm just gonna, like, as we're talking, I'm just gonna kind of let them play a little bit so people viewing the
Run them
video
through
can
because they're
actually
well
see
written,
them.
I'm sure. Yeah.
But yeah, so they are definitely in order, because that was really important. The order of operations, I think, is always, as the producer in me, is always about order of operations when it comes to
And
video.
as a learner and as a designer, it's just as important. It has to be in the right order,
Yeah.
or people are going to start scaffolding stuff on the wrong stuff. And I know it seems like, well, what's the big deal, Chuck? Well, it is a big deal. When you
Right.
get into really technical stuff, it's an incredibly big deal.
Yeah.
You don't want to hit the big red button before you make sure you need to. Don't teach me how to push the red button until I know why to push the red button. And, it's a silly example for a nuclear control center, but, it's a simple concept that sometimes is not so easy to design.
Absolutely. And, in our last video, we talked a little bit about the idea of, should this be one big training, or should there be two separate trainings?
Or 5 separate trainings.
Yeah, and the what we were talking about specifically was the task of actually technically running a webinar and troubleshooting a webinar, and also then the task, I call it task, but the mastery of being able to lead communication-wise, be able to
Two different things.
Yeah, to be able to lead a conversation between panelists fairly, equally, make sure people are given, that equal measure of time, that one is not dominating the whole conversation. And I did decide to put it all together because I want to break this up into 4 course modules that will address one of the course module. Oh my gosh, there goes my Rhode Island accent.
Say important.
Blooper. Anyway, I'm going to keep this in because this is who I am. I speak kind of, funny sometimes.
Everybody knows Denise knows she speaks Rhode Island.
And
I have an interpreter here with me in the studio in my other ear telling me.
But I decided that I'm going to have 4 distinct course modules that will walk them through technical, launching, looking at the Zoom environment.
No, I think that's fine.
Technical.
From a design perspective, all you need to do is make sure your objectives are also pocketed in that same way. So you have 4 sets of objectives. You can link them together, and you can do your evaluation of mastery at the end. But I think your evaluation of mastery is going to be different for each of these too. So you're going to have to think about how you're going to pull that off. I mean, some could be informal.
Yes. And so, in thinking
See, this is where it gets complicated, right?
Right. Like in thinking through some of the evaluation at this point, I didn't give a tremendous amount of thought to it yet because I wasn't quite there. But in thinking about the evaluation part, I was thinking of each course module will have a quick assessment, I would call it, to help reinforce the ideas, make sure that they are understanding the idea. Don't use the word understanding. Reinforce the ideas by having multiple choice and unlimited time and limited attempts to be able to get 100 score on all of these assessments, these quick assessments.
That's fine. However you decide to do it.
This way,
but I think you would agree it has to be 4.
It has to be 4. Yes, it has to be 4 assessments. You're saying evaluations. Yes, absolutely. Each one needs to have its own distinct evaluation, and then at the end, after they've completed all 4, after they've had that role-playing exercise with the facilitator to reinforce and to have the facilitator observe behavior, then they would take a comprehensive.
Yeah, that's fine.
20 question course.
But just realize you have 4 modules.
Okay.
You're just simply linking them together.
Okay. Yeah, that's good. And so here's an example of an enabling objective that talks about that one of the course modules will be about the learning how to lead a panel of people talking.
It's definitely a different topic. And it's also, if you'll notice, changed objective domain.
It did. Yes. So this is effective.
What do we go from in the original and what are we in now? We started.
This is effective, right? Am I right with that?
Well, this is more cognitive, probably a sub of affective. The first one was cognitive with a sub of tactile.
Okay.
Because manual manipulation, right?
Yes. These domains get
So
me.
they are different domains.
They're different domains. And so because of those domains, that's the important part of that. The important point is performance agreement. We need to make sure.
Exactly.
Okay.
That's why you have to have 4.
Okay. That makes perfect sense.
So all of you watching this, we went from 1 course to 4. Didn't take long. And even though it'll essentially be the same period of time, or it might not now, I think it's going to go longer than you think it is. But from a design perspective, as the designer, you see this all the time. And this is where you help clients, and this is where you help SMEs to look at this. And, okay, these are very distinctive chunks. And if you amalgamate them, there's some risks that you're going to take. Some people do it, they do it okay, and some people probably do it better than others, but you still have 4 separate areas. And where that matters is mastery and domains and performance agreement.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I do have a question. So there are going to be 4 courses, but can all of these 4 courses be grouped together into one umbrella of a course? Like, so it's the
Absolutely.
online moderator training
course.
course, but there are 4
course.
modules to this course that they have to complete
Yeah,
and
you-
be
they can-
evaluated
it
on.
can- You can do it all at the same time. And the beautiful thing about it is it builds in break periods. It builds in,
Yes.
discussion and Q&A. And there's all kind of things you can put in these pockets between these modules.
Yes, and that
So
was another
I don't
thing.
see it as a downside, but I just want everybody to appreciate the fact that from a design perspective, these are 4 products, 4 distinct products.
Okay. No, that's very helpful because I wasn't looking at it like that, like 4 distinct
Yeah.
products.
No, I'm sure.
And
Yeah.
I mean,
That's where a designer needs to help you. Like I should be helping you. I hope I'm helping you.
you are.
And as an instructional designer, these are the kind of things you provide to the process. So now I can be really sure that when this product is put out in implementation, that I'm going to have a great, great, great success rate because people are going to look at these as 4 distinctive things that they need to do. They all amalgamate into the end product of being part of this program and being a host and what have you, but it is 4 distinct things.
Okay.
And so now imagine this in very complex environments. And now you see why instructional design is so important.
Yes.
This is how we get to efficiency, and this is how we get to have our learners reach mastery because we focus on things that need to be focused on and don't blur the picture and don't add things that don't need to be in there. We can put them somewhere, but we don't always want to amalgamate them into one module or one course.
And that's why it doesn't take 30 minutes to create an entire course.
It takes 30 days, 30 weeks, 30 years. There's no top. I'm sure there are people that are working on the same project that started in 15 years ago because that's just the way some of this design is. It's just continuous design.
Guinness Book of World Records.
Yeah, we should see what the longest course design. I bet they don't even have a category for that. We should probably do that. That
Right?
would be
Wouldn't
fun.
that be
Do
fun?
a video on that. Yeah, our application to Guinness.
Send it in to them. We'll get some footage, some coverage.
Oh yeah, we should. That'd be a hoot. Yeah, we'll have to think about that.
Well, this was incredibly helpful as always.
Good.
Gosh, yes,
So
absolutely.
tell me what you learned because we got lots of folks watching this that are probably not as familiar with design. We got some pros out there watching too, and they'll send me an email and tell me where I messed up. But from a young designer in the sense that you're starting in the field, you've been through some grad classes, but not a lot of course design experience except for your projects. So what lights went off as we talked about these things?
In the prerequisite discussion, lights went off that I did not consider. Versioning is really important because I ran into that glitch. And so that is a huge part of it, is understanding that, putting that in the prereqs. If you're going to be a moderator and you want to do this, you need to have at least this version or higher for Zoom, for PowerPoints, for those 2 particular programs. You need to have the latest versions of them, or whichever one I put in there. And so that was really important because I didn't consider that at all. And not wasting time on prerequisites that don't matter. So for this particular case, age is irrelevant. I mean, they do have to be 18 or older because it's adult concepts that we're discussing, but for the most part, there's no upper range. Even education level, that's not an important prerequisite here. Well, English as a first, English L1, grade 8, that is important. So that's probably a prerequisite. They need to be able to.
And we talked about that before, so that'll be in there anyway. It's kind of assumed there.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, of course, the whole taking a task analysis, because I think that I can understand how a designer would run into trouble by writing out a task analysis, because to me, that's when my brain went first. You got to write that out so you understand the order of operations,
which is good.
What's needed.
That's good instinct. Yeah.
But making sure that when you do write your objectives, that they're written as objectives.
It's different.
I didn't think of that. And I didn't think of that. I think I did it okay, but I did it without really knowing. So that's something that it's a light bulb that I will never forget is, okay, make sure that you don't just take this task analysis and make it a procedure.
Don't write procedures. Right.
That's really, really important. And then, of course, the whole aspect of how big, like what does this course actually entail? Is it just one course, or am I teaching them different things? So segmenting them into different course modules makes a lot of sense, but make sure that those are distinct and you're evaluating for those distinct modules so that you can understand the mastery, what is expected mastery-wise for each of those course modules.
So this is good. So I think Denise picked up some things tonight. I hope all of you that are watching this will look at this and say, I hadn't thought of it that way. I didn't know it was that complex. I didn't know I needed to go in that deep in this particular area. And as I've said over and over again, design is a science. It's a very detailed and complex thing to design a very simple course. Not that this is simple, but you just have so many things you need to think about. You got to push so many buttons and ask so many questions. And each time it will pay off. All the work that you invest in this process, especially in the design phase, you'll find a reward for. So we're going to stop this one here. And the next one is going to be on development. And I'm pretty sure Denise is going to have a prototype of at least one of these modules to show us. And we can maybe go through a pilot testing kind of an overview and think about all the things that go on in development. So it's a series. Certainly let us know what you think. If you have any questions, please put them in the comments, and we look forward to seeing you in the next segment.
Bye.